Thank you, Mr. Purcell, and to everyone for coming in. Just to return to that issue of asylum seekers, just first, a very general question is, asylum, the title asylum seeker, is that a de facto status that someone is given, or is it only given to a person once they've been processed through the system at the first stage?
It's when they would apply for asylum.
For asylum, but there are people that don't get that far to apply for asylum that are removed before then, or I'm just looking at an answer to a PQ, and I was just curious about the term. People who are refused leave to land and are removed from the state. What does that mean?
They would be refused leave to land because they wouldn't have the necessary papers. But some people who would come in without the necessary papers would then apply for asylum. So, but not everyone who does applies for asylum.
Here, so I mean they're on our territory, but it's called refused leave to land. Does that mean that they're in the airport without papers, or
they would be in the air? Some of them would be turned around in the airport, and some might be held, and sometimes the people who are held would then make asylum applications, but a significant number of them would be turned around at the airport.
And the ones who are turned around, though, the significant number, I have a number here about 2,500 a year actually, who are refused leave to land and removed from the state. Are they entitled to apply for asylum at all, or?
Well, I suppose anyone can apply.
So they get here with with no papers, and they decide not to apply for asylum. They just shift back again. And and where do they stay while before they're removed from the state?
Some of them before they're removed. Well, some of them would be turned around virtually straight away, depending on where they had come from, and others might be detained within the facilities that we have.
And how long might they be detained there for?
It depends. The ones who are refused leave to land and don't apply are turned around fairly quickly.
Is that 24 hours, or?
It can be within 24 hours. Yeah, a small number were applied for asylum. I'm just looking at the figures for 2012. Some 2,239 persons were refused entry to the state at ports of entry and were returned to the place where they had come. A small number of these applied for asylum and were subsequently granted permission to enter the state so that their applications could be processed. So there's a constant number of people coming into the system who are turned around at the borders.
But then some might not be turned around immediately within 24 hours, and then they're detained or they're kept somewhere.
You mightn't be able to, given depending on the time they come in or where they are, it mightn't be possible just to turn them straight around.
And if they're being detained here, then are they under arrest, or what's their status, or how does that work?
So some of them would be held because they have no papers. Yeah.
But they're under arrest then, is it? Or,
sorry, they're not under arrest in the context that someone would normally be under arrest, but they would be detained pending, leaving the country because they don't have papers.
Okay, and where are they detained? Is there a special? Are they just kept in a waiting room in the airport, for example, or is it?
Some of them would be there would be kept in the airport, depending on the opportunity to turn them around. Some might be kept in the prison overnight, depending on when they could move. So if they had to stay overnight, that's where they would be held. I think most of them would be held in Clover Hill.
And what about children who come in and with a parent and don't have the papers, but we can't turn them around quickly? Are they also being? Where would they be detained, or with the?
Well, obviously, there are no children in Clover Hill prison. It's a male prison. If there were any females detained, they would be held in the DOCA centre. And sometimes, depending on the age of the infant, they might be kept there, or else they would be, the mother and the child would be detained somewhere else, other than the prison, depending on the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Then in relation, when we come to the asylum seeker, because again, it's an issue that's constantly coming to my attention in terms of the length of people waiting for their applications to be processed. And by the end of 2012, 60% of residents in our centres have been there for more than 3 years waiting for their asylum applications. I have a figure here of 272 people who've been waiting more than 7 years to have their applications processed. So what's happening in a delay there of 7 years?
Well, I suppose as I've already indicated, the length of people would stay in the system depends on a number of factors, and it also depends on the individual circumstances. You know, RIA accommodates those. In addition to others, they accommodate people who are involved in judicial review proceedings. They're there in relation to people who have applied for subsidiary protection. They're there people who are there who have had deportation orders, and they're appealing against them. And there are a number of steps in the process. The effect of all of the processing of all of those steps would be that it takes time, and that in turn means that they spend a longer time in the system. So the people that you're referring to, who would have spent a significant number of years within the system itself, would generally be people who've gone right through the process and, I suppose, exhausted. You know, they're going through every, I won't use the word exhausted, but they're going through every particular step in the process. For example, sometimes there can also be delays because an individual will go through every step themselves, and then only after they've gone through every stage of the process, then they would go through the same steps for their children. So that in turn can, result in, I won't hesitate to use the word delays, but it can increase the amount of time that they spend in the system. And it is a complex legal situation, as I'm not sure whether you were there when I was talking earlier on, but we have a duty of care, and we have to be scrupulously careful in the way we deal with these situations because of our obligations under, international law.
But are we failing in that duty of care by keeping someone in that situation for 7 years? Like, it's limbo.
We've had a bit of a discussion. I'm not sure whether, I can't recall.
No, I was listening. Yeah.
The reality is we believe that we are providing a level of care that's of a high standard. As I did say, that it's not a perfect system,
Sure.
And the vast majority of people who are in it would much prefer to be in a situation where they didn't have to stay in one of our centres. They would much prefer to be in housing that might be provided by a local authority. They might prefer to then have all the services provided in other ways. However, the cost to the state would be enormous, and it would also, there's an element of the draw factor to that as well.
No, and I've seen the value for money report that was done on the alternatives and the costs involved and the increased costs, but I'm talking not just in the accommodation, but in what they are permitted to do, if you like. I mean, in 2003, I think there was an EU directive that ourselves, I think only 2 countries opted out of, and we were one of them, which meant that asylum seekers are not entitled to work or get education after 12 months, as is the norm in most of the European countries.
Well, the direct provision where they're provided with a certain amount of each week, but they're provided with all their needs: food, clothing, accommodation, medical care. Children attend schools in the areas where the centres would be located, so there is access to education. I'm not sure.
There isn't access to education. You can't attend a 3rd level course, for example.
Well, there's what we're doing is we're providing basic accommodation and services, but up at a certain standard. And I already said earlier that nobody would like to be in those circumstances for a period of lengthy duration. However, it is the best we can provide within the level of resources that the state has to cover this particular cost.
Why is it in the UK, though, for example, after 12 months, an asylum seeker can go out and work and get a job and do that, and we can't let them do that?
I don't know why that's the case in the UK.
Why can't we apply that here? Why not, if an asylum seeker wants to go out and work and have the dignity of work?
Well,
it's not a cost issue.
It's not necessarily a cost issue, but there are issues. I mean, I don't really want to get into to open up a debate on the policy, but there would be issues such as there would be an element of draw factor here as well, which has to be taken into consideration. That we are providing a basic level of care, and we believe it's a humane level of care. It's not luxury. Nobody ever said it was, but we provide the basic rights. Children have access to all educational facilities that they're required. Whether or not we want to provide a system where adults can go to third-level courses or whatever, there's limits to what we can do within the budget that we have.
Okay, and can I just ask about the €19, I think it is, a week that's given? That's given out then by the individual centres, is it? They administer that?
Yeah.
And do they have the authority to withhold that money from an individual?
I don't think they don't. I'm not aware of cases where that money has been withheld.
Okay. In what circumstances would that money be withheld from an individual, and who would make that decision?
I'm not sure. I don't think it happens as a matter, in practice.
Well, look, it came to my attention just recently that Hatch Hall did a survey to find out who was maybe doing a bit of work or who was getting some study, and as a result of that information, they decided to start withdrawing or withholding the €19 a week. Has that come to your attention?
I haven't. No, I
refusing to give out the lunches.
That hasn't been brought to my attention. If that's happening, it hasn't been brought to my attention.
I'll bring it to your attention now then, because that has been reported to me by residents in Hatch Hall that they're not being allowed to get their lunch or their lunch box if they're going to be out for the day, and they're not getting the €19 a week.
Sorry, just to correct something. The payments are actually made by social welfare. They're not made directly by the management in the centres, and. It may well be the case that it's been withdrawn on that, but look, if you're telling me that
it may be the case that it's been withdrawn.
If for example someone has been working, it may well be the case. But I'll have to check that.
Sure.
It's certainly not. It's what I am aware of. It's certainly not something that happens very often.
Okay. How does that process work then, though? Does someone make a report that I know that this person is working, and then
it may well be the case that someone might say that this person is working or whatever, and I think that presumably is what may have happened.
And could it happen if someone was studying? Like if someone was.
It would probably be less likely to happen if someone was studying, but look, I can check that out. As I said, I'm not aware of the Hatch Hall situation, but I'll check that out and I'll come back to you.
But there'd be no grounds by which one of the centres would be able to refuse a meal or refuse.
Oh no. There'd be absolutely no circumstances.
Have you received any reports of that happening?
No. Are you refusing meals?
Refusing to give, say, a lunch?
No. I'm not aware. That's.
Well, I might bring that to you separately from this then, because I've just.
Are you aware of cases?
Yeah, in the last 2 weeks I've been getting quite a few.
Okay, well look, I'd like to talk to you separately about that. Yeah, because that should not be happening.
Okay, no, I will then. I'll bring that to you separately after this meeting. Chair, do you want me to?
Oh, you have 5 minutes.
In relation to the cost of the centres, then, Maureen O'Sullivan got a very good breakdown of the contracts for each centre and how much they cost. Is individual scrutiny paid to each contract? Because it seems to be a bit of variation in terms of what's being paid to different centres, even ones which have the same amount of people in them.
Yeah, there is. It's very carefully monitored. The contracts are awarded. The business is tendered for, and contracts are awarded, and it's very carefully monitored. Then after that, to ensure that there is delivery of what's intended.
Could you think just off the top of your head what might bring a differential, say, of 50,000 or 100,000 between two centres that had the same amount of people in them for the same amount of time?
They might be providing a different level of services, or the occupancy. There may be a different type of a different mix of occupant in one centre in comparison to the other, and the needs, and therefore the costs might vary because of that.
So, say if one centre had families, say, it might have additional costs to a centre which didn't.
Yeah, I mean, you have a mix of single males, single females, single, say, females with children, a male and a female with children. you know, you have a range of mixes, and obviously then they would have differing needs, and depending on the type of accommodation, some of it might be more suitable for single males, for example, than it would be for families, and you know, the level of accommodation and services provided would differ because of that, and that is would generally be the reason. But the average rate paid to commercial contractors is around €30 per person per day.
How would a contractor come to win that contract? What's the process by which that happens?
Sorry,
How does a contractor come to win that contract to provide services?
it would be tendered, and they would apply in the, you know, with the normal procurement, you know, procurement arrangements.
That's tendered out publicly, is it?
Oh yes, yeah.
I can leave it there for the moment, Chair. Thank you.
We can come back.